At my nephew Kyle's sweet 16, the party I'd fully funded, my mother Carol looked at me and said, "This is tacky and embarrassing."
We should have just done it ourselves.
I simply nodded and replied, "All right, then I guess I'm done footing the bills." That moment didn't come out of nowhere. My childhood can be summed up by a single, repeated phrase: consider your brother. Like when I was 11 and won a $150 prize in a school writing competition. When I showed my parents the check, my mom just frowned. David didn't win anything.
You need to share this with him.
A flood of guilt washed over me, and I handed my brother $30. He just scowled. Only 30? My mom sighed, told me to consider my brother, and I ended up giving him 100. I knew it wasn't right, it was my work, my win, but I did it anyway because their acceptance meant more than fairness. Years later, a promotion at 32 finally gave me real savings. For the first time, I had financial breathing room. So when Kyle's 16th birthday approached, I wanted to celebrate. I spared no expense: venue, DJ, a custom cake, the works. I spent $4,500, hoping this generosity would finally prove I wasn't selfish, that I was a good daughter, sister, and aunt. But as I was cleaning up after the party, my brother David cornered me. "Did you see his cousin's party last month? A live band, a whole themed lounge. That's how you do a milestone." Before I could speak, my mom was beside him. "If you were going to be this stingy and humiliate Kyle in front of his friends, you shouldn't have bothered." David jumped in. "Kids at school are calling it the discount party. He's getting teased because you wouldn't stretch the budget." I wasn't even angry at first, just hurt, remembering the thank you card I'd naively hoped for. But as they berated me, something snapped. I looked at their expectant faces and asked, "What did either of you contribute?" David rolled his eyes. "I'm his father. My presence is the contribution." I kept my expression neutral. "And what about his birthdays the last 2 years?" They fell silent. We all knew the answer. I'd paid for those, too. Without another word, I turned and walked to my car. But I stopped around the corner. I thought of every time I'd emptied my pockets for them, every sacrifice I'd made. For the first time, I let myself see the truth clearly. And I decided to do something about it. I marched back. David was already on his phone, likely complaining about me. "One more thing," I said. "Who pays for Kyle's orthodontist?" "Our insurance," David said dismissively. "Which insurance?" I asked. "The plan I pay for." His face went pale. "And his sports fees?
His laptop?
Summer camp?" The smug look vanished as he realized it had all been me. When my mom tried to interject with "family helps family," I cut her off. "Really? Then where's my help?" They exchanged a look of sudden, uncomfortable recognition. I didn't wait for an answer. I just left, feeling a weight lift, yet knowing the hardest part was just beginning. That night, I cycled between relief and a deep, aching grief. When I woke up, my phone was flooded, dozens of missed calls and texts. The first voicemail was furious, calling me a selfish child who had ruined Kyle's big day. By the 10th, the tone had shifted to pleading, suddenly remembering my upcoming birthday and promising to make it special this year. The next morning, 41 missed calls and 22 messages lit up my screen. Scrolling through, I watched the texts morph from anger to desperation in real time. The guilt started to seep through the cracks, whispering that I'd overreacted, that apologizing would be easier for everyone. I made myself listen to the voicemails. The first from David was sharp and cruel. The fifth from my mother Carol used her trademark sad voice, talking about family loyalty and her disappointment. The latest, from David again, was almost friendly, dangling the promise of a nice birthday if I'd just help out a bit more. Seeing the pattern laid out, angry, desperate, manipulative, made it impossible to ignore. I got out of bed, opened my laptop with shaky hands, and for the next 2 hours, I created a spreadsheet. I scoured a decade's worth of bank statements, Venmo history, and credit card bills. Wedding expenses for David, help with his down payment, years of tutoring for Kyle, sports fees, camps, birthdays, and the constant emergencies that always seemed to befall David's car. The final total made me stop breathing: $42,000. Not even counting the health insurance I still paid for Kyle. I stared at the number. I could have put a down payment on a condo. Instead, I was in a small apartment funding their lifestyles. My hands were shaking. I opened a family group chat and started typing boundaries. No more surprise requests, no more guilt trips, no more funding everything while pretending others contributed. My finger hovered over send for 20 minutes. The old, programmed voice in my head whispered, "Consider your brother." I realized I wasn't ready to send it yet. I needed more than anger to hold this line. I needed a plan and support. A new fear hit me. What if they had my banking info from all those transfers over the years? I frantically checked every account. Everything looked normal, but I changed all my passwords immediately, making them complex and unique. I made a note to check if I was on any accounts I didn't open. At work the next day, I was distracted. My coworker, Mark, noticed and asked if I was okay. I gave him a vague version: family drama over a party. He listened without judgment and then mentioned, casually, that his sister had found therapy helpful for similar boundary issues. He said it in a way that didn't make me feel broken, just like someone who could use a new tool. That night, insomnia took over. My mind replayed a lifetime of "Consider Your Brother." I was 11 again, handing over my prize money. I was 22, withdrawing from a study abroad program because David needed rent. I was 27, working 2 jobs through grad school while David posted about being tired from his part-time gig. The memories connected like chains, and I finally saw it. This wasn't occasional help. It was systematic training programmed since childhood to always put their needs above my own. The clarity was as painful as the memories. Instead of accepting David's story about Kyle being bullied over a budget party, I decided to check for myself. I remembered I had access to Kyle's school parent portal from paying his fees. I logged in and searched for any incident reports or counselor notes about bullying. There was nothing: no records, no meetings, no documentation. Next, I looked at Kyle's social media. Every picture from the party showed him and his friends laughing, dancing, genuinely having fun. The comments were filled with "best party ever" and "this looks amazing." Not a single post mocked the decorations or called it cheap. The bullying story was a complete fabrication. I sat in the dark, letting that truth sink in. Then I made a firm decision. I was suspending all new financial payments to David or my mom while I figured out my next steps. The insurance for Kyle was paid through the end of the year, so I wasn't cutting off his healthcare. But not another dollar would leave my hands until I had real boundaries in place. The mix of terror and relief felt strange, but right, like I was finally protecting myself instead of just keeping everyone else comfortable. Sleep was impossible. My brain replayed the movie of my life. At 19, canceling my Paris study abroad program because David needed rent. At 23, exhausted from double shifts while David napped. Each memory was a link in a chain I was only now seeing clearly. I finally fell asleep near dawn, only to be woken a few hours later by a voicemail notification from my mom, sent at 2 a.m. Her voice was soft and sweet, a total shift from her parking lot anger. She talked about family misunderstandings getting too heated, and then, her tone dripping with false warmth, she mentioned my upcoming birthday. "We want to make it really special this year, honey. Maybe that nice downtown restaurant you like? We can work this out together like a family should." The manipulation was blatant now. In 32 years, they'd never made my birthday special unless I planned and paid for it myself. Last year, I booked and paid for my own dinner. The year before, no one did anything. Now, suddenly, after I cut off the money, my birthday was a carrot to dangle. That morning, I opened my laptop. I searched for "Therapist's Family Dynamics Boundary Setting." Most profiles were generic, but one stood out: Dr. Evans. Her bio specifically mentioned helping people break free from entitlement dynamics and peacekeeping patterns. It was like she was describing my life. Before I could overthink it, I booked an intake session for Thursday. Reading her profile made me feel less crazy. Maybe my situation wasn't normal, and maybe there was a way out. I thought about my dad, Robert. He was always the quiet peacekeeper, staying out of money talks. I didn't know if he had any idea how much I'd been covering. Part of me wanted to show him the spreadsheet. The other part was terrified of shattering the family myth we'd all maintained. That evening, I pulled out a notebook. At the top of a blank page, I wrote, "And no negotiables." Then I began to fill in the lines. 1. No surprise requests for money. 2. No guilt trips about family duty. 3. Complete transparency about who pays for what. 4. A strict monthly cap on any help I choose to give. The words looked foreign, like rules for strangers, not family. But writing them down made them feel real. I added one final line. All financial discussions must be in writing. No more ambushes. For the first time, I had a list to hold on to instead of just a feeling of resentment. The next morning, my phone exploded with notifications from the family group chat. My mom, Carol, had posted a flood of old childhood photos with captions about happy family memories. David followed with messages comparing me to other, more generous aunts, listing expensive gifts they'd given. I read 3 messages before my chest tightened with panic. I muted the chat and turned my phone off completely. For 2 hours, I sat in my kitchen, just breathing, free from the constant pressure. When I turned it back on, there were 15 more unread messages. I didn't open them. Instead, I looked up the number for Kyle's school. I called during my lunch break, explained I was his aunt who helped with expenses, and expressed concern about the bullying rumors. The receptionist connected me with the school counselor, Ms.
Reed.
We scheduled a confidential meeting for the next afternoon to discuss Kyle's well-being. After work, I met my coworker Mark at a nearby coffee shop. I told him the fuller story, the $42,000, the fabricated bullying, the manipulative voicemails. He listened intently, then said it sounded less like family helping family and more like financial exploitation. His practical suggestion: write a formal, unemotional boundary statement to send when I was ready. His calm perspective made me feel less alone, like this was a problem I could manage, not just a mess I created. That evening, I took another step. I searched for a financial advisor and found one, Ms. Vance, who specialized in helping people audit their finances and set up protective systems. I booked a consultation for the following week. I needed real structures, alerts, separate accounts, a budget, to make it impossible to cave during moments of emotional manipulation. The act of booking the appointment made me feel proactive. I was building a team, a therapist for the emotional patterns, and an advisor for the financial ones. My first therapy session with Dr. Evans was on Thursday. In her calm office, I outlined my story. She immediately began naming patterns I'd felt but never had words for. Parentification, a child forced into adult responsibilities for siblings, golden child/scapegoat dynamics, and enmeshment, no boundaries between family members' needs. Hearing my experience described so accurately was overwhelming. I started to cry from the sheer relief of being understood. Her first homework assignment was simple but profound. Institute a 72-hour pause before making any financial decision involving family, no matter how urgent the claim. The goal was to respond from clarity, not from the programmed guilt of a lifetime. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed. It was my dad, Robert. His voice was quiet, concerned. He said my mom had mentioned a problem, and he wanted to understand. He didn't sound angry, just genuinely confused. I agreed to meet him at a diner near his house the next morning. Maybe it was time to stop protecting everyone with my silence. I printed my 10-page spreadsheet, placed it in a folder, and vowed not to chicken out. That night, as I was making dinner, a loud, aggressive pounding shook my apartment door. I heard David's voice shouting that we needed to settle this like adults. I looked through the peephole at his red, angry face and felt a new resolve click into place. I was done rewarding these ambushes. I texted him through the door. "I'm not available. Leave now, or I will call building security." He knocked a few more times, then finally stomped away. My hands shook, but I felt a surge of pride. I had held my boundary and protected my space. I arrived at the diner early, nerves fluttering. My dad, Robert, slid into the booth, looking tired and confused. I skipped the small talk. I pulled out the folder and slid the spreadsheet across the table. His face paled as he read. His finger traced down the columns, stopping at the large sums. The $10,000 toward David's down payment, 3 years of tutoring fees. He looked up, his voice quiet. Lena, I had no idea. Your mother always said David was handling things, that you were just helping now and then. I watched him flip through the pages, his shock growing with each entry. He'd genuinely been in the dark. He sat in silence for a long moment, staring at the $42,000 total. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. I enabled this, he admitted. By staying out of it, by assuming it was fine. I was part of the problem. He promised to have a direct conversation with my mom about the real financial situation. While I was cautious, his acknowledgement felt like the first real progress I'd ever made. Later that week, I had my consultation with the financial advisor, Ms.
Vance.
In her downtown office, we went through my accounts line by line. She helped me cancel all the automatic transfers I'd set up for family over the years, those small, monthly drains I'd stopped noticing. We set up instant alerts for any transaction over $50. Then, she helped me open a new savings account at a completely different bank, one no one in my family knew about. We moved a chunk of money there as a protected emergency fund, money that would be safe from guilt and manipulation.
Ms.
Vance helped me establish a firm rule, a maximum gift budget of $200 per month, to be used only if I consciously chose to. Systems are stronger than willpower, she explained. I left feeling like I'd put on financial armor. Armed with this new clarity, I decided to verify the school situation personally. My meeting with counselor Ms. Reed was in her small office the next afternoon. She was professional and kind. She explained that while Kyle dealt with typical academic pressure and some social anxiety, the bullying crisis was significantly inflated. She showed me notes from her sessions with him where he'd said the party was great and he'd had fun. Then she said something that hit home. Sometimes, parents project their own insecurities onto their children. The pressure to have the best or the most often comes from the parent, not the peers. She confirmed the real issue was David's constant comparisons, making Kyle feel nothing was ever good enough. After the meeting, I gathered my courage and texted Kyle directly, asking if we could talk privately. He called me within the hour, sounding relieved. He admitted he'd loved the party, that his friends had a blast. But afterward, his dad had shown him photos of more expensive parties, making him feel embarrassed for being happy with what he had. My heart broke for him. He asked me not to tell his dad we spoke, and I promised, while gently encouraging him to keep talking to Ms.
Reed.
That evening, a new kind of panic hit. My mom, Carol, called in a tearful frenzy, claiming the power company was shutting off her electricity the next day unless she paid $500 immediately. The old, programmed fear of being responsible for her suffering shot through me. But I remembered Dr. Evans's rule. I need to verify this first, Mom, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. She got oddly quiet. I hung up and called the utility company directly. The representative looked up her account. The balance is current, she said. No past due notices and no shut-off scheduled in the last 6 months. The sickening realization washed over me. It was a complete fabrication. A manufactured emergency to trigger my guilt. How many crises over the years had been lies. I called my mom back and calmly told her I'd spoken to the company and knew there was no shut-off. She stammered about misunderstanding the notice. I didn't engage. I can't help with this, I said, and ended the call. The devastation was profound, but so was the clarity. The boundary wasn't just about money. It was about truth. Armed with the truth from the school counselor and the sting of my mother's fabricated emergency, I sat down that evening to write the boundary email I'd been drafting in my head for weeks. I addressed it to both David and my mom, Carol. I kept the language clear and unemotional. Future gifts would have reasonable caps, I set. There would be no more emergency funding without full transparency. All financial discussions required honesty about past contributions. I stated these were final, non-negotiable boundaries, and I was done being treated like a selfish ATM after years of funding them. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. The response came in less than an hour. My mom's reply was a long, winding email filled with childhood stories, platitudes about family sacrifice, and subtle accusations that I was destroying the family over money. She wrote that I'd regret this when I was older and alone. I felt the old, familiar guilt rising like a tide. But this time, I didn't reread it or dissect every sentence. I simply typed a 6-word reply. My decision is final. Then I closed my email app and turned off my notifications. For 2 days, there was a tense quiet. I focused on work, but then my cousin Jessica texted me. "Hey, everything okay?" I saw David's post. I opened social media to find a vague, dramatic post from my brother about people who get a little success and forget the family who supported them. It had dozens of supportive comments from extended family. My fingers itched to comment with my spreadsheet, to blast the truth. But I made myself close the app. I texted Jessica back that I was fine, just dealing with some family stuff. Her response, "Figured it was something like that. David has a way of spinning things," made me feel less isolated. My next therapy session with Dr. Evans was perfectly timed. I told her about the social media post and the struggle not to defend myself publicly. She nodded. "That's actually a great example for what we call jade," she explained. "That's justify, argue, defend, explain. People pleasers instinctively jade to try to make others understand their boundaries, but it just opens the door for debate." We spent half the session practicing simple scripts. "I'm not available to help with that." I repeated until I could say it without my voice shaking or adding a because she taught me to recognize the physical signs of my programmed guilt, the tight chest, the sweaty palms, the urgent need to fix things, so I could pause and choose a different response. I got to test those skills the very next morning. A text from my mom popped up. "Honey, could you spare $300 for groceries? Things are so tight this month." The old Lena would have sent the money in 5 minutes, resentful but compliant. This time, I sat with the request. I felt the panic, the tightness. After an hour, I used the script. "I'm not able to help with that, but I can send you information for the local food bank and a free budget counseling service." I put my phone in a drawer. When I checked it, there were 3 furious paragraphs about how cruel I was, how she never thought her own daughter would treat her like a charity case. The guilt tugged hard, but I held firm. Offering resources, not cash, was the truly helpful long-term response, even if it felt harsh. I didn't reply. Silence, I reminded myself, was also a boundary. A few days later, my dad, Robert, called and asked if I'd join a 3-way call with him and David to try to work things out. I agreed cautiously, bracing for the old dynamic. David's voice was loud and aggressive from the start, accusing me of twisting things to play the martyr. I felt myself shrinking inside, the old programming urging me to smooth things over. But then, my dad surprised me. He cut David off mid-rant. "The party was generous, David," he said firmly. "And I've spoken to the school counselor myself. The bullying story doesn't match what's actually going on with Kyle." David tried to argue, but my dad held his ground. I sat in stunned silence. He had never backed me up against David before, not in our entire lives. The call ended with David claiming we were both against him and hanging up. For the first time, I didn't feel guilty. I'd held my boundary, and I hadn't been alone. After that call, I met with Ms. Vance again. I explained I needed a clear, indisputable record of everything I'd paid, not to demand repayment, but as proof against any future rewriting of history. We transformed my emotional spreadsheet into a clean, factual document. Dates, descriptions, amounts. We attached scanned receipts and bank statements. Ms. Vance suggested I keep digital copies in secure cloud storage and email a copy to myself. Seeing it all laid out so clinically made me feel stronger. It was evidence, not just a list of grievances. She also helped me set up a simple system to automatically log any future expense, so I'd never have to rely on memory. The following week, a major project deadline at work sent my stress level soaring. And with it came the old, insidious urge, Maybe if I just sent a small peacekeeping payment to my family, the pressure would ease and I could focus. I actually opened my banking app and started a transfer. Then I caught myself. The 72-hour rule. I remembered. I closed the app and made a note in my phone. Revisit in 3 days. I forced myself to focus on work. When the 72 hours passed, the frantic urge was gone. The project got done, and the family drama hadn't imploded. I realized my anxiety about not paying was usually worse than the reality. I then received an email from the school counselor, Ms.
Read.
She was planning to have a conversation with David about the school rumors and the pressure he was putting on Kyle. She wrote that her duty was to her students' well-being, and sometimes that meant having difficult talks with parents about how home dynamics affect kids at school. She wanted to give me a heads up, as David might not react well. Reading her email, I felt a wave of relief. A professional was introducing accountability where I never could. That evening, as predicted, David called, absolutely furious. "How dare you drag the school into our private business to make me look bad?" he shouted. I let him rant for half a minute, then calmly interrupted. I contacted the school because I was concerned for Kyle after hearing about bullying.
Ms.
Reed's job is to support students, which includes talking to parents. He tried to talk over me, spiraling into old grievances, but I didn't take the bait. I kept my voice level. I did nothing wrong by checking on my nephew's well-being. I stand by that. Then, before he could escalate further, I said, "I need to go now," and ended the call. My hands shook, but the feeling wasn't fear. It was strength. I had stated my truth and refused to be drawn into his chaos. The next morning, I drafted a final, structural boundary. I sent a message to both David and my mom, stating that all future discussions about money or family logistics would need to go through my dad, Robert, as a neutral party. I would no longer respond to direct requests or engage in one-on-one financial conversations. I copied my dad on the message. It felt extreme, but necessary, a system to remove me from the direct line of fire. I called Dad immediately after to ensure he was willing. To my relief, he was. "I should have stepped in sooner," he said, his voice firm. "I can see how the pressure and manipulation have been working. I'll be the point person." Having him agree to this role made the boundary feel sustainable. It wasn't just my willpower against their pressure anymore. There was a new system in place. 3 quiet days passed. Then, my phone buzzed with a text that made my eyes sting. It was from Kyle. "Thanks for the party. It really was great. Sorry my dad made it weird." A second message followed, asking if we could plan something low-key for my birthday. This was the first time any family member had acknowledged the party was good and that David's behavior was the problem. That small spark of hope felt precious. I wrote back, suggesting a simple trip to the art museum or a Thai restaurant, just the two of us. His enthusiastic reply felt like real connection, completely separate from money or obligation. An hour later, my dad called. His voice was different, resolute. He told me he'd sat down with my mom and David, laid out the spreadsheet, and gone through every payment. He'd set his own boundary. He wouldn't listen to complaints about me unless they first acknowledged the $42,000. He'd also offered to help David create a realistic budget. I felt skeptical, but deeply grateful. One parent was finally seeing the situation clearly and taking action. My second therapy session with Dr. Evans focused on the grief of losing my old identity, the good daughter, who kept everyone happy. She helped me see I could still have relationships without being a bank account. We practiced more scripts for my upcoming birthday, like, "I already have plans," or "that doesn't work for me," until I could say them without a hint of apology. I decided to reclaim my birthday. I created an event invitation for a dinner at my favorite Italian place. In the details, I clearly stated, "I am paying for my own meal as my gift to myself. Everyone else pays their own way if they choose to attend." I sent it to friends first, got warm yes, then took a deep breath, and sent it to the family chat. Planning my own celebration felt like a powerful reclamation. On the morning of my birthday, my mom called. Instead of happy birthday, she launched into a proposal. The family would take me to a fancy steakhouse if I agreed to pay for everyone, since it would be my gift to them. I actually laughed out loud. I explained I already had plans with friends, as per the invitation sent days ago. There was a long, telling silence on her end, the silence of a shattered assumption. I wished her a good day and hung up, feeling a mix of sadness and solid satisfaction. That afternoon, my dad showed up at my door with a small gift. It was a framed photo of us from when I was 7, both covered in paint from a project we'd done together. "I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself," he said, his voice quiet. "Your boundaries are reasonable and necessary." His validation meant more than any expensive gift ever could. For the first time, a parent saw me as a person, not a provider. That evening, I walked into the restaurant to find my friends already at a big, lively table. The warmth was immediate and genuine. We laughed, shared stories, and for the first time in years, I celebrated a birthday without managing anyone's expectations or secretly calculating costs. My friend Mark made a joke about sending the bill to David as a learning experience, and the easy laughter that followed felt freeing. Near the end of dinner, Kyle showed up, slightly nervous, with a handmade birthday card covered in inside jokes and little sketches of things we talked about. It was thoughtful and personal, the antithesis of a costly, showy gift. He stayed for dessert, relaxing among my friends, and quietly told me he'd spoken to my dad about how his father's constant comparisons made him feel inadequate. Seeing him advocate for himself filled me with pride. As we left, I spotted David sitting in his car in the parking lot. Kyle gave me an awkward look and headed over to him. I approached slowly. David rolled down his window, looking uncomfortable. He admitted he hadn't known if he was welcome inside, then handed me a folder through the window. An old document of mine he'd borrowed years ago, and I'd forgotten about. "I'm working on figuring things out," he mumbled. It wasn't an apology, but it was the first acknowledgement of any responsibility without immediate demands. I decided to offer a path forward, without expectations. I told him I had a simple template breaking down what I'd covered into manageable amounts, with no pressure or timeline. I wasn't demanding repayment, but offering a structure, if he ever chose to use it. He looked genuinely surprised. "You're leaving it up to me?" he asked. I nodded. He said he'd think about it. I walked away feeling lighter. I'd extended an olive branch without compromising my boundary. A few nights later, my mom, Carol, called. Her voice was different, halting, awkward. She offered a stilted apology, explaining her own upbringing taught her to prioritize sons over daughters. She wove in justifications about different times and her intentions, but her tone was softer. She admitted maybe she'd pushed too hard about David. I recognized this as the closest I'd get to full accountability from her now. In response, I clearly restated my needs: no more comparisons, no money talks, respect for my boundaries. After a long pause, she reluctantly agreed. I accepted this as imperfect progress. About 2 weeks later, I received an email from my financial advisor, Ms. Vance, with the subject line, "Milestone Achievement." My new, secret emergency fund had reached $5,000, the exact amount I'd spent on Kyle's party, but now saved for my own security. Staring at that number, I felt a surge of proud relief. To celebrate, I took myself out to a nice dinner I'd always wanted to try, quieting the old guilt that whispered this money should be held for a family crisis. Every dollar saved for myself felt like a reclaiming. My follow-up therapy session with Dr. Evans helped me process the mixed emotions: grief for the family I'd wished for, relief for the one I was building. We crafted maintenance plans and scripts for future guilt trips. She reminded me that boundary setting is a practice, not a perfection. I also received an update from Ms. Reed, the school counselor. Kyle was attending regular sessions to manage anxiety and build self-esteem apart from parental pressure. He was doing better. Knowing he had professional support eased my lingering worry that my boundaries might harm him. Dad emailed too, updating me that he'd begun budget sessions with David, making it clear I was not involved, respecting my boundary. They'd identified small, practical cuts David could make. It was a minor step, but it was action. A few weeks after my dad's email, my phone buzzed with a text from David. Attached was a screenshot of a payment confirmation for $125 with a note, Kyle's tutoring, first installment. Below it, he'd written, working on paying back what I can. I stared at the screen, a mix of surprise and caution settling in. My first instinct was to reply with effusive thanks, but I stopped. This wasn't a gift, it was a long overdue responsibility. I typed a simple, neutral response. Received. I appreciate the payment.
No celebration, no exes gratitud.
As I set my phone down, I acknowledged it. This was the first time he had voluntarily paid for anything without being cornered or pressured. That evening, I pulled out the thick folder containing a decade of financial records, receipts, statements, my painstaking spreadsheet. I sat at my kitchen table and made a complete duplicate for my files. Each page was a memory of a sacrifice. When I finished, I closed the original folder, carried it to my closet, and placed it on the highest shelf behind some boxes. The proof existed if I ever needed it, but I was choosing to stop letting this ledger of the past dictate my present. Filing it away felt like creating mental space for a future beyond this drama. The next morning, I opened the family group chat. I typed a proposal for new communication rules. No more money or conflict discussions in the group. One-on-one threads for personal talks, the group reserved for neutral updates and planning. I held my breath and hit send. To my astonishment, my mom replied first. I think that's fair. My dad agreed. Even David sent a thumbs-up emoji. It was a small, imperfect agreement, but it felt like another step toward a healthier dynamic. 3 weeks later, I walked into a small local art gallery I'd admired for years, but had never entered. Before, the internal calculator would always start. This money could cover a car repair for David or books for Kyle. Today, I just browsed. I found a beautiful print of a forest path, dappled in light and shadow, priced at $350. Without a second thought, I paid for it. When I got home, I hung it on my living room wall. The 11-year-old girl who had to give up her art contest winnings looked on as the 32-year-old woman bought art for her own joy. It felt like a quiet, powerful homecoming. My relationships with my mom and David were smaller now, more distant and carefully navigated. Conversations were shorter. The old ease was gone, replaced by a polite, cautious respect. They sometimes slipped a hint from Mom, an entitled comment from David, but the pretense that the old dynamic was acceptable was over. Lying in bed that night, I reflected on the journey. I was learning the most important lesson. Real family connection doesn't require setting yourself on fire to keep everyone else warm. The warmth I felt now came from my own peace, my chosen friendships, the supportive professionals I'd enlisted, the tentative bridge to my nephew, and my dad's hard-won allyship. The family I'd been born into has changed, perhaps forever scarred, but operating with a new honesty. The family I was building for myself, through boundaries, self-respect, and healthy connections, was just beginning. And for the first time, I was truly at home in my own life.